Welcome to Compact Mysteries from CompactHistories.com, the show where we try to unravel a different bite-sized mystery each week, from baffling disappearances and strange objects to unexplained events and mysterious places. This is episode 83, The Mystery of the Our Lady of Fatima Miracle. In 1917, Fatima was not yet the vast pilgrimage centre it would later become. It was a small rural community in central Portugal, surrounded by fields, scrubland, stone walls and olive trees. A short distance away lay Cova da Iria, a piece of grazing land where local children tended sheep and families worked hard for a modest living. It was an unlikely place for an event that would become one of the most famous religious mysteries of the 20th century. The wider world around Fatima was anything but peaceful. Europe was deep in the First World War, and Portugal had entered the conflict in 1916. Portuguese soldiers were serving on the Western Front, while families at home faced uncertainty, grief and hardship. At the same time, Portugal itself was still adjusting to the First Republic, established after the 1910 revolution. The new Republican government had introduced strongly secular and anti-clerical policies, creating tension between official politics and a largely Catholic rural population. That atmosphere mattered, because the events at Fatima would soon be seen not only as a religious claim, but as a challenge to the spirit of the age. The story began with three shepherd children, Lucia dos Santos and her younger cousins, Francisco and Jacinta Marto. They lived in Aljustrel, a hamlet near Fatima, and spent much of their time watching sheep in the surrounding countryside. They were not famous, educated, or powerful. In fact, that became part of the fascination. The claims that emerged from Fatima did not begin with clergy, politicians, or scholars, but with children from poor farming families. According to the later accounts associated with Fatima, the children had already experienced strange religious visions before 1917, including apparitions of an angel. But the event that transformed the local story into an international one was said to have happened on the 13th of May 1917 at Cova da Iria. The children reported seeing a bright female figure who told them she came from heaven. She asked them to return to the same place on the 13th day of each month for 6 months and to pray the rosary for peace and the end of the war. At first, the claim might have remained a village rumour. Children tell stories, adults doubt them, and rural legends can fade as quickly as they appear. But Fatima did not fade. The children returned, the reports continued, and curiosity began to spread beyond their families. What started as a private claim in a field was about to become a public confrontation between belief, skepticism, and authority. After the reported apparition on the 13th of May, Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta found themselves caught between obedience to the mysterious lady they said they had seen and the pressure of the adults around them. Lucia, the eldest, became the main speaker. Jacinta was said to have seen and heard the figure, while Francisco saw her but did not hear the words directly. That difference in the children's accounts became one of the details later preserved in Fatima tradition, giving each child a distinct role in the unfolding story. On the 13th of June, the children returned to Cova da Iria. This time, they were not alone. Around 50 people reportedly accompanied them, a sign that the story had already moved beyond the privacy of the family home. The apparition was said to repeat the request for daily prayer and to give Lucia a painful message, that Francisco and Jacinta would not live long, while Lucia would remain to spread devotion to Mary's Immaculate Heart. That prediction gained later significance because Francisco died in 1919 and Jacinta in 1920, both after the influenza pandemic that struck Europe at the end of the First World War. At the time, however, the children's claims were still developing, and the people around them did not all react with reverence. Some villagers believed them. Others thought they were confused, attention-seeking, or being manipulated. Even within Catholic circles, caution remained. The Church does not automatically accept claims of supernatural visions, and local priests had reason to be careful. The third reported apparition, on the 13th of July, greatly intensified the mystery. By then, the crowd had grown into the thousands. According to later accounts, the lady again requested the daily rosary, and promised that in October she would reveal who she was and perform a miracle so that people would believe. This was crucial. Fatima was no longer simply a sequence of private visions. The children were now claiming that a public sign would come on a specific future date. July also introduced what became known as the Secret of Fatima. In later writings, Lucia described a vision of hell, a call to devotion to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, and a third part connected by Vatican interpretation to suffering, persecution and the Church in the 20th century. The Vatican officially published the third part of The Secret in 2000, linking it to the struggles of the Church and Christians under atheistic systems during the 20th century. By midsummer, the Fatima events had become more than a local devotional story. A date had been set, a miracle had been promised, and the crowds were growing. That meant the next stage would not be controlled by the children alone. Authorities, skeptics, and the press were beginning to pay attention. The idea of secrets gave Fatima a sharper edge. A simple apparition story could be dismissed as pious imagination, but a hidden message suggested urgency and danger. According to Lucia's later account, the July apparition included warnings about war, sin, prayer, and the need for conversion. These themes were not unusual within Catholic devotional life, but the timing gave them force. Europe was already being consumed by war, and Portugal was politically divided between secular Republican authority and popular Catholic loyalty. News continued to travel by word of mouth. Families told neighbours, pilgrims began to arrive, and skeptics came to see what all the fuss was about. By August, Cova da Iria was no longer just a quiet grazing field. It had become a place where the devout, the curious, and the hostile gathered together. Fatima was turning into exactly the kind of phenomenon that local officials feared: public, emotional, unpredictable, and religious. The Republican authorities had practical and political reasons to intervene. The First Portuguese Republic had promoted secularization, and public religious excitement could be seen as backward, destabilizing, or politically useful to opponents of the regime. The local administrator, Artur de Oliveira Santos, became one of the central figures in this stage of the story. On the 13th of August 1917, when the children were expected at Cova da Iria, they were instead taken to Urem. The official explanation was linked to preventing what he saw as growing clerical exploitation, but in Fatima tradition the episode became a dramatic attempt to force the children to reveal the secret. The children were questioned and reportedly threatened, but they did not withdraw their claims. They were released after several days and returned to their families. The August apparition, according to Fatima accounts, did not take place at Cova da Iria on the 13th, because the children were absent. Instead, it was said to have occurred on the 19th of August at Valinhos, another nearby location. This interruption added to the drama. Rather than stopping the movement, the intervention made the children appear more determined, and the authorities more heavy-handed. The September apparition then became a turning point in public attention. The crowd was now much larger, and the roads to the site were said to be packed with people. They came with prayers, illnesses, hopes, doubts, and questions. Some wanted cures, some wanted proof, some wanted to expose a fraud. The reported message again pointed forward to October, when the lady would identify herself and the promised miracle would occur. That promise created a rare and risky situation. The children had not merely claimed that something invisible or private would happen. They had pointed to a date, a place, and a public sign. If nothing happened, Fatima could collapse into embarrassment. If something did happen, it would be very hard to ignore. As October approached, the question became impossible to avoid. Who would go to Cova da Iria, and what would they see? By early October 1917, Fatima had become a national curiosity. Newspapers were interested, believers were expectant, and skeptics had an obvious reason to attend. The predicted date of the 13th of October gave the whole affair a deadline. It also made the Fatima claims unusually testable. Many alleged visions remain private, witnessed only by the person who reports them. Fatima was different. The children had said that a miracle would be given so that all might believe. The crowd that gathered at Cova da Iria was mixed. It included devout Catholics, local villagers, the sick, the desperate, journalists, anti-clerical observers, and people who simply wanted to witness whatever happened next. Estimates vary, but a contemporary account in the newspaper O Século described around 70,000 people at the site. That number is often repeated in accounts of the miracle of the sun, though other estimates are lower. Either way, the crowd was enormous for a rural field in 1917. The weather added to the atmosphere. Rain fell heavily and the field became muddy. People stood under umbrellas or in soaked clothing, waiting for midday and watching the children. To believers, this was a vigil. To skeptics, it was a test. To journalists, it was a remarkable public spectacle. The fact that reporters attended matters because Fatima did not survive only through later devotional retellings. It entered public debate almost immediately through newspaper coverage. The children arrived with their families and moved through the crowd. Lucia remained the central figure. According to her account, the lady appeared once more and identified herself as Our Lady of the Rosary. The message again emphasized prayer and moral conversion. Those words were reported by the children, not by the crowd, because the apparition itself was not seen by everyone in the same way. What followed, however, was claimed by many witnesses to be visible in the sky. This distinction is important. The apparition belonged to the children's experience. The solar phenomenon belonged to the public memory. That is why the 13th of October became so powerful. It appeared to connect a private series of visions with a public event reported by people who had not necessarily come as believers. Some witnesses later said they saw the sun appear as a spinning disk, casting colours across the landscape. Others said it seemed to move, plunge, or zigzag in the sky. Some reported that wet clothes and ground dried quickly. Not everyone saw the same thing, and some saw nothing unusual at all. That mixture of shared testimony and inconsistent detail is at the heart of the mystery. Something memorable clearly happened in the minds and memories of many present. The question was what? A miracle? A mass optical effect? A religious experience shaped by expectation? As the rain stopped and the crowd looked upward, Fatima moved from rumour into legend. The event remembered as the miracle of the sun reportedly lasted only minutes, but those minutes shaped the entire Fatima story. After the rain, the clouds were said to break. Witnesses described the sun as visible but strangely softened, allowing people to look towards it without the usual pain. Then came the most famous claim. The sun appeared to spin, tremble, change colour, and move across the sky. The phrase that endured was that the sun danced, an image recorded in contemporary reporting and repeated ever since. Avelino de Almeida, a journalist for the Lisbon newspaper O Século, became one of the most important witnesses because his paper was not a devotional Catholic publication. His reporting helped make the event known far beyond Fatima. The presence of press witnesses, photographers and skeptics gave the story a public record that many believers later regarded as unusually strong evidence. Fatima was not a vision tucked away in a monastery or preserved only by word of mouth. It was a mass event covered in print almost as soon as it happened. Yet the evidence was never simple. Witness accounts varied. Some described dramatic solar movement. Some remembered colours spreading over people and landscape. Some thought the sun was falling towards Earth. Others saw only changes in light or nothing extraordinary. That does not automatically prove fraud. Large crowds rarely produce identical testimony, especially during emotional, unexpected events. But it does make the miracle of the sun difficult to analyse as a single clear observation. For believers, the timing was central. The children had said months earlier that a miracle would occur on the 13th of October, and a large crowd then reported extraordinary phenomena on that date. The apparent fulfillment of a prediction gave the event its power. It was not merely that something strange was seen in the sky. It was that something strange was seen after 3 children had repeatedly said a sign would be given. For skeptics, other explanations have been proposed. These include retinal effects caused by staring at the sun, shifting cloud layers, atmospheric moisture, dust, suggestion, expectation, and the psychology of crowds. The argument is not necessarily that witnesses lied. More often, skeptical explanations suggest that sincere people may have interpreted unusual light effects through the religious expectations already present at the site. The Catholic Church did not make an immediate official declaration. It investigated over time, gathering testimony and assessing whether the reported apparitions were compatible with Catholic teaching. In 1930, Bishop José Alves Correa da Silva of Leiria declared the Fatima apparitions worthy of belief and permitted public devotion to Our Lady of Fatima. That approval did not force Catholics to believe in Fatima, as they would a central doctrine of the faith, but it allowed the devotion to flourish officially. By then, the miracle of the sun had become much more than a strange afternoon in a field. It had become the centerpiece of a new global devotion, and the children at the heart of it were already passing into Catholic memory. Both devotion and loss marked the aftermath of Fatima. Francisco Marto died on the 4th of April 1919, and Jacinta Marto died on the 20th of February 1920. Both were still children. Their deaths gave the earlier messages a tragic resonance, especially the reported June apparition in which Lucia was told that her cousins would soon go to heaven, while she would remain longer. Lucia entered religious life and lived until 2005, becoming the long-surviving witness through whom much of the later Fatima narrative was recorded. The physical site changed dramatically. Cova da Iria, once a rural grazing area, became the sanctuary of Fatima, one of the major Catholic pilgrimage destinations in the world. The Chapel of the Apparitions, the Basilica of Our Lady of the Rosary and later the Basilica of the Most Holy Trinity, turned the landscape of the original reports into a large devotional complex. Pilgrims travelled there seeking prayer, healing, penance, and connection with the events of 1917. Fatima also became closely tied to 20th century Catholic history. Its messages were interpreted in relation to war, communism, persecution, and the papacy. The Vatican's publication of the third part of The Secret of Fatima in 2000 linked the vision to the suffering of Christians and the violent struggles of the 20th century. Pope John Paul II had a particularly strong connection to Fatima, especially after surviving an assassination attempt on the 13th of May 1981, the anniversary of the first reported apparition. The Church's recognition of Fatima did not end debate. Skeptics continue to question the miracle of the sun, pointing to inconsistent testimony, the absence of a worldwide astronomical event, and the dangers of staring at the sun. Believers respond that the event was local, predicted, public, and witnessed by many people who were not all predisposed to accept it. Between those positions lies the enduring mystery. Fatima is not simply a question of whether the sun physically moved. If it had, the whole planet would have noticed. The more difficult question is what thousands of people experienced, why so many remembered it as extraordinary, and how 3 shepherd children became the center of a story that refused to disappear. Today, the miracle of Fatima remains a rare case where faith, politics, journalism, psychology and history all meet in one muddy field. For Catholics, it is a sign of Mary's intervention and a call to prayer, repentance and peace. For historians, it is a window into Portugal during war and religious conflict. For skeptics, it is a fascinating example of perception, expectation, and mass testimony. Perhaps that is why Fatima continues to hold attention. It offers no simple ending. The children were real, the crowds were real, the newspaper reports were real, the devotion that followed was real. What remains disputed is the meaning of what was seen when the rain stopped and thousands of faces turned towards the sun. That brings us to the end of this episode of Compact Mysteries, part of the Compact Histories Network. If you enjoyed it, please follow or subscribe wherever you're listening so you don't miss any future episodes, and consider leaving a rating or review, as it really helps new listeners find the show. You can find more episodes at compactmysteries.com, where you can also explore our other podcasts covering biographies, history, disasters, warfare, and true crime. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. Finally, please consider supporting the show directly by buying us a coffee. Head on over to compacthistories.com/mysteriescoffee to see how. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.